Hey, I'm back. The Severance reviews won't stop coming no matter what you do, so don't even try. Following last week's Woes Hollow, us Severance fans had been left with some pretty major plot developments that we were waiting to see the fallout of. Helena Egan revealed as a spy, Helly returned immediately afterwards to work, and Irving fired from his position, effectively murdering his innie version that we have grown to love. Trojan's horse is that fallout. Season 2 of Severance has made things incredibly confusing for all of us, sparking all sorts of fan theories about what's happening at Lumen, and while Episode 5 certainly does not give us a lot of answers, it feels like we are reaching that point where these mysteries may start to resolve, such as where is Miss Casey, Mark's wife? Where is the exports hall that Irving's Audi had been depicting? And of course, what is this mysterious and important work that the innies are doing? Trojan's Horse may be a bit of a rest episode, but I certainly enjoyed myself, and it feels a bit like a refresh, with unrest brought back to MDR after they had previously settled into their new environment. It's clear that Mark, Helly, and Dylan are not just going to sit around anymore. If you haven't watched this episode, this is your spoiler warning. And if you haven't watched this series, you must have been really confused by that introduction. First, let's talk about MDR, because they have each quickly reached their breaking points. Dylan is the most affected by Irving's death, which makes a lot of sense, and he's especially disturbed, as am I, by Lumen's decision to act as if Irving never existed. His desk is removed from their arrangement, and he's even removed from the group pictures somehow. Somebody at Lumen must be really good at Photoshop. Dylan's unease is matched by Helly, who is obviously completely lost, having been kept in the dark for a lot of time, and now being very behind on the events of the series. Additionally, Helly seems to feel violated by the fact that her Audi, Helena, was able to steal her identity so easily without the rest noticing, aside from Irving. At this point, I would be very worried for Helly, who is at an incredibly emotional point right now. Truly, the only reason that Helly was able to settle into Lumen during Season 1 is that she felt acclimated with the people. Now, one of them is essentially dead, and one won't even talk to her, Mark, because of his distrust. I wouldn't be surprised if this develops a bond between Helly and Dylan, due to them sort of being the last ones standing. I personally would love to see the two of them head to the exports hall, as Irving clued in Dylan on its whereabouts, certainly leading to him continuing that plot in Irv's honor. I could imagine a scenario in which Dylan and Helly find Miss Casey there, before Mark even does, and the two have to decide whether to prioritize her safety or keep digging once they're in too deep to stop. Speaking of Mark, let's talk about how he's been doing, because it's not well. Mark's innie seems to feel a deep separation from his work by this point, which is kind of bad for everyone, and is clearly feeling the effects of his Audi's reintegration. I would even posit that Mark's disinterested view of Irv's funeral is possibly his Audi's personality breaking through, a man who never really takes anything emotionally but instead literally. It doesn't seem like him, but then again, we'll never really know what is him and what isn't, which is the thrilling part. Mark is becoming a much more hostile force, no longer being able to trust Helly and having accidentally disconnected himself from Dylan due to their misaligned viewpoints. There's even a scene in which he stands up to Milchick with a harsh rejection of his passive aggressiveness, and it's clear that Mark will hereby refuse to sit still, which is exactly what Lumen needs him to do. Even his Audi is distracted, completely prioritizing reintegrating and saving his wife Gemma, who he sees alive as Miss Casey by the end of the episode. Previously, he had been told this was the truth, but now that he's seen it with his own eyes, he will most definitely have even more drive to get this job done. Mark's innie and Audi, two characters who initially shared some personality traits but differed in others, are slowly becoming too similar to be differentiated at all. Come to think of it, Helena being able to play Helly so effectively may not have been a complete act. Dylan's layabout nature mixed with an emotional center are present in both versions of himself. Irving is just as well-worded and soft on the outside as he is on the inside of Lumen. As the show goes on, severing appears less and less effective, and Lumen appears to have less and less control than they think they do. Really, the people Lumen controls the most effectively, however, are the unsevered. Mr. Milchick is currently experiencing a plotline very similar to Jeff's from the UK TV show Utopia, a man who initially is presented to have lots and lots of power, but truly only presides over a small section of the larger whole that is his company, and is more easily disposable than he'd like to think. Considering how things ended for Jeff, I'd be a little scared for Milchick as he becomes more and more disillusioned with Lumen's antics. One of the most intense scenes of the episode is certainly the one in which Milchick propositions the ever-frightening Natalie to discuss the paintings which he received depicting himself as Carr, a moment which will most certainly be heard about by the higher-ups, no matter how secret Milchick may believe the conversation is. After his first review as department head goes poorly, he does decide to take things more seriously, but it seems less like Milchick has been reminded of his devotion to Carr, and more like he's decided to take his anger out on the innies. Though Milchick is initially depicted as a completely villainous man, he notably has more connection to the innies than the rest of the staff, and is disgusted by Miss Huang's suggestion that he should refuse a funeral for Irv to stop the innies from feeling like humans. He is being pulled between two sides that could both cause everything to blow up in his face, making it more and more likely that things eventually will do just that. Tremaine Tillman plays anxious Milchick just as well as he does manipulative Milchick. Though Lumen may be losing control over the innies and their department head, it does seem as if they may be attempting to gain it in other places. One example of this would be Rickon, who is beginning to fall for the Lumen mind control, revealing himself to be a bit of a shill for whatever makes him the most money, just like most cult leaders. Devon is, of course, appalled by her husband's behavior, and this does imply things about the two of theirs relationship that I previously would have shied away from saying. I always found it hard to believe that Rickon was ever a decent and typical guy, but it seems more and more like the truth, given that Devon never would have connected with him otherwise. I personally think that there was a time when Rickon presented himself as a rebel, but in a more usual way, simply as someone who does not accept the first answer he is given, just like Devon. In that way, they are the same. However, Rickon is beginning to show that, with enough money, he will accept that first answer. Michael Chernus embodies this greed and self-obsession in such an obnoxious way, and while that sounds insulting, it's actually very smart. There was something charming about Rickon at first. While he always seemed like a crackpot weirdo, everybody liked Rickon to some extent, and now we see him for what he really is. Finally, I am able to believe that this couple exists. Awesome-ass Jen Tulloch falling for goofball wacko Rickon seems bizarre, and yet, when you peel back the layers, it kind of makes sense. I personally am frightened to see Rickon fall further down this rabbit hole, as I'm certain he will be singing the praises of Lumen soon enough, and may even work as a spy for them, giving information on Mark Scout's happenings in exchange for promotion. I wouldn't put it past him. There's also a couple smaller little subplots. We see the first signs of Helena Egan breaking, and it begins to seem possible that even the Egans may not be in control at this point. Jaime Egan is too old to run the company himself, and Natalie's board, if they do exist, could very well be the people truly in charge. The invisible commanders who are able to force this woman back into a place where her life has nearly been taken twice. While Helena is a disgusting person, it's truly nerve-wracking to see even her lose her grasp over her own mind. Finally, as I wrap things up, let's discuss Irving. Irv's back, and I couldn't be happier. They are, in fact, continuing his Outies plotline with Bert, just as I thought, and while I don't have a lot to say about it, I'm just happy that John Turturro is not being left by the wayside considering how talented he is. This is the point where everything is ripping apart at the seams, and it weirdly appears that Irving may be the last remaining character who is at peace. Yet, I would not be surprised if his interactions with Bert turn into yet another investigation, considering how much of a puzzle solver Irv's Outie has made himself out to be. I'm going to give Trojan's Horse a solid 7.5 out of 10, being one of the least eventful episodes yet, but laying down a lot of pieces and displaying many impressive performances. I will say it every week, but this show is special, and my message this time around is that I hope to God that the talented people who work on it get hired for other work in other places once this little piece of mastery is gone. Bye now.